Right, so hello everybody, welcome to this panel discussion or debate, if you will, about transhumanism in research and in life. First of all, welcome you all, and of course welcome to our guests. Just a quick word from our sponsors, if you will. We are co-organized by the AI Center of the FEE-CTU and Machine Learning Meetups. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions whatsoever, we'll be happy to have them. For your convenience and ours, we've decided to split up the debate into 3 separate parts. After each part, you'll be more than welcome to ask any questions that you might like of the panelists that you see before yourself. First of all, I'd like to welcome non-binary cyborg artist and autism advocate Dodo. This is her. This is them, sorry. Then we have futurist Bolek Kerouš, and then we have AI archaeologist and popularizer of AI, Sara Polak. Welcome you all, and thanks for taking the time to speak with us today. Now, the first panel, or the first portion of the panel that we have is very sort of broadly entitled Everyday Age Plus. The first thing I'd like to ask you all is, because transhumanism and cyborgism and cyborg art is obviously something very personal, and it's obviously something that is very modular, I'd like each and every one of you to tell me what it means to you personally. So Sara, why don't you take it away?
Oh, yeah, thank you very much, and welcome everyone on this warm summer day. I suppose as an archaeologist, transhumanism for me is the augmentation of human capabilities, but it's not, I don't want to fetishize it in the sense of like the last 100 years or like the future 1,000 years. I want people to understand it as any kind of analog or digital technology that helps us in any way. So whether that's a prosthetic from ancient Egypt that basically they used to be beautifully carved out of mahogany and like essentially like extremely precious belongings that people used to have, or whether that is a stone tool that helps you crack open bone, that you can get bone marrow out, and that therefore your brains can exponentially expand, that lions or carnivores could not do. And for me, like, a history of humanity is a history of interaction with technology, and it's a history of transhumanism, essentially. The kind of Julian Huxley essay that really popularized it, like 1953, is really interesting and slightly like wafts of eugenics, because he was the president of the Eugenics Society in Britain until 1965. So I think there's been a lot of misconceptions around it unnecessarily, but I just view it as like a archaeological fact that like fascinates me.
Bolek?
Yeah, okay, so for me, transhumanism is broadly about just like transcending, I guess, human form, or overall our human condition current, and limitations of our form. Like the part that I'm recently most interested is aging, and basically how we age and whether we need to, and how what we can do with it, basically. But other than that, a lot of it is also connected with like broad tech, and how like basically technology interacts with humanity and with humans. So like transhumanism for me, and I guess for everybody, depends on like how you define it. But for me, it's mostly about trying to enhance your abilities and transcend your limitations, I guess, through tech, and in my specific focus, mostly focused on aging and longevity.
Dodo, go ahead.
Personally, I don't call myself a transhumanist, because I call myself a cyborg artist or cyborgist, and it's because I think that there is a difference between, and yes, sorry for my English, it may be a little bit slower and a little bit less fluent than English of my friends, and I'm sorry for that, but I hope you can understand me. And yes, so I think there is a difference between transhumanism and cyborg art, and sometimes people tell me that you are transhumanist and something like that, but I don't think so, because yes, as I said before, there is a difference that transhumanism, I see difference in how transhumanism perceives a human and other species. I see that in transhumanism, the cyborg is perceived as something higher than the human, and the human is perceived as something higher than animals, than other animals. But in cyborgism, we are all part of the biodiversity. So a lot of cyborg artists are vegetarians or environmentalists, and they are like focused on nature more. And cyborg art is, yes, I think I need to explain what is cyborg art. Cyborg art is a movement founded by Neil Harbison, who is a colorblind artist that has antenna attached to his skull. And with the antenna, he can not see colors, he see only in grayscale, but he can hear colors. And he can like make music from pictures and pictures from our voices and something like that. And he founded the cyborg art movement, which is the idea that we can extend our senses by external or internal prototypes. So, for example, his friend Moon Rivas used to have seismic detectors in her body to detect earthquakes all around the world. Or Manel de Aguas has fins that are connected to that allows him to perceive weather. So I have decided to create or develop my own sense, not by myself, because I am not a technician, but by my engineer and by students of this school, Vincent Stuchli, student of this school called Vincent Stuchli. Yes, so if you know him, he helped me with developing my sense. And my sense allowed me, because now it's unluckily it's broken, let's be real, and it allowed me to sense radiation like ionizing radiation as vibration, like radioactivity as vibration on my skin. So I obtained a new sense, and this is the idea of cyborgism. Cyborgism is a movement that is trying to bring us closer to nature, but sometimes I feel that transhumanism is a little bit like detaching us from the nature, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, I kind of agree with that. Like, my own problem with transhumanism is in a similar direction. A lot of people, or at least the most like famous one, like Ray Kurzweil, or maybe Zoltan Istvan, who's the famous like American, basically like transhumanist party leader. They are kind of very individualistic, and even their like politics is a lot of like libertarian focused. So there's not that much space, at least in the like transhumanist movement, in the mainstream one, for more like different voices that would be a little bit in like a different direction. So the very like individualistic nature of transhumanism is kind of not something that I agree that much as well. But yeah.
Also, one big difference is that in transhumanism, as far as I understand it, transhumanism is focused more on helping all people to become cyborgs. The transhumanism wants all people on this earth to become cyborgs, and all people to like upgrade themselves. I perceive it as some kind of religion, because like in normal religion you have some Armageddon, it's in English, yes, and some day or some Soudny den, how will you?
Judgment Day.
Judgment Day, in which God will come and destroy all bad people. And in transhumanism, I perceive it very similarly, because there is a singularity, technological singularity, and it's like a buzzword. And some transhumanists are saying like singularity will destroy all of us except the ones that will become cyborgs. But cyborg art is more focused on individual senses and individual experience, and it's more like underground art scene.
So we've got some big points there. I was going to kind of ease us into it, but clearly that's not the way we're gonna do this. So we're jumping head in. Perfect. When you read the annotation of this panel, you as an audience were to some extent exposed to the fact that transhumanism is very often associated with sort of slight misconceptions when it comes to what it actually is. So Bolek, this is a question for you. Have you personally encountered any of these misconceptions in the wild that you'd like to dispel?
It's just difficult because there's a lot of like sub-communities, and like I myself might vibe a bit more with some of them and less with others. For example, as Dino mentioned, there are the singularitarians who are kind of I guess betting it all on the singularity. That's a lot of what like Ray Kurzweil is kind of preaching. But there are like also others, other different like subcultures, or at least like I guess thought patterns or whatever. Something like there's, for example, extropians, or there are also, it's called technologism, which is more on the like environmental side. So there's a lot of like subcultures within transhumanism, and I guess maybe a bit of a problem of transhumanism itself is it's like a big tent term. So a lot of people can like view it very different ways. But I tend to agree with some of the criticisms that Dodo had. Like for me, myself, I wouldn't necessarily call myself transhumanist as well, but a lot of the thinking that I have in terms of like, technology and progress and science and how it interacts with humanity is kind of shaped even by the early transhumanistic thinking and mainly by like the way they talk about it, the rate of progress and exponential technology and all those different things and how they interact. So like for me, I don't know if there are like specific things to dispel because there's a lot of like different people that are preaching in different ways. But for me, I'm just trying to take the things that like work for me and they basically like put together what I think makes sense. So that's kind of the approach I'm taking, I guess, yeah.
The discussion that we're having is pretty much answers my next question, which is for Sara, but I'll ask it anyways. What fascinates you about this topic? Why are you interested in it?
Yeah, I guess I'm interested in it because it's an ancient topic. Like ancient Greeks used to write about automatons that used to like protect people on islands, and then Medea, who was the crazy lady that Jason from the Jason and the Argonauts married, and then she melted his new wife and killed both their children. So it was fun. Like Greek mythology is great, but the fact that you see the concept of automatons appearing thousands of years ago and it's really interesting what you both mentioned, is I think we see it as like a next evolutionary step. Humans are incredibly fragile, incredibly narcissistic, and we cannot bear the fact that like there's another step after us because we think, no, this is it, like this is the top of evolution that we can achieve. And I think it really closely connects to artificial intelligence as well. I know that we'll be talking about like some of the sentience around it, but basically like we see it as the next evolutionary step, and it's somewhat like a stratification of society, that if you have the access to information and to the technology, you can augment yourself as a human being and live longer, sleep better, like basically have better chances in life evolutionarily. But then it's like Rossum's universal robots. It's like this kind of like half organic, half mechanical like entity. But I think that we're slipping into, and people like Ray Kurzweil or like Nick Bostrom, they would be great futurists if they didn't actually like preach it onto people as current reality. And what really kind of, what I love about transhumanism is like the beautiful like evolutionary possibilities around epigenetics, etc., that it gives us. What scares me about it is the amount of, and pardon my French, the amount of bullshit that is being unleashed on like the average unsuspecting person who's then afraid of technology. So that it'll basically divide even more, because the people who don't have access to the information will be more scared of it and adopt it less, and the people who have access know what's going on and they'll adopt it better and have a better quality of life. So one of the things that I try to do is really like break through the membrane and trying to tell people there's nothing to be afraid about. But it's problematic because obviously being scared of stuff is a big business, and being scared of technology is a big business. So that fascinates me about it as well, yeah.
We're going to address moderated evolution in a little bit more depth in the second part of the debate. But before we do so, I have a question for Dodo, and I want to know, because this is something of a lived experience for you, cyborg art is. It's something that is an integral part of you. Have you encountered any reservations from people in your surroundings or online?
Like any reactions?
Yes.
Sometimes people like positive or negative?
Both.
Okay, so for example, my family takes it easy because they see that this is something, yes, and now we can see the intersection between cyborgism and my autism, because it's my autistic special interest. We autistic people tend to have something called special interest, and it means that when we got focused in something, the focus is so intense, and it became our very life and our passion. And this happened with cyborg art for me. And when they see that I'm happy as I am, and I dare to be like authentic, it's like they are very, very supportive, and they love that I'm happy, and they are, yes, I have really, really great family, and lovely and supportive family. And from other people, some people finds it like interesting, and some people, yes, we talked about some misconceptions. So one big misconception about cyborgism is that it's not it's detaching us from nature and from spirituality, which is not true. And I bet that more like cyborg artists are more natural and more spiritual people than a lot of like modern people. So yes, this is for me at least the biggest misconception about being a cyborg artist.
So that was the first part of our debate. So if there are any questions that we can answer for you, we'd be more than happy to do so. Not just yet. Fantastic. So we can happily move on to the second portion. The second portion is going to be a little bit more about moderated evolution, or when we talk about moderated evolution, we're going to be talking about the concrete impacts of transhumanism, or in some cases cyborg art, on the living experience and the shared experience that we all have. Now, the first one I'd like to kind of go for is a societal playing field, so kind of a broad brush strokes of interest. So what I'd like to know about, of course, is, Sarah, your specialty, Cloud Civilisations. What are they?
So it's a good question. I hope I'll figure out someday during my research. Yeah, so basically, I'm an archaeologist, cognitive evolutionary anthropologist, but I've spent my whole life in tech, and I've been seeing basically like the different services and the different like ways of life that tech can very easily replace, where traditionally you had structures, whether it was an empire or a nation state or a corporate kind of mission, vision, you know, integrity, like all these values. And tech like very elegantly tends to automate these things. So essentially like what I'm trying to claim is that on one hand you have the traditional society that we know and love, or love less, depending on who you are. And then next to it, there is a constant underground, a constant kind of civilizational chaos that is happening, which puts evolutionary pressure on the traditional structures to change. A really prime example of this is like the catacombs in Rome. So Rome was obviously like pretty polytheistic, like they didn't really care about much, but it also had a population of 1 million people. If you have a population of 1 million people, you can't afford to bury your dead because you risk the spread of disease. So, however, the Christians who wanted to bury their dead out of religious reasons, they basically said, like, look, we can't do that. We can't cremate our dead. So they made a pact with Rome where they said, okay, you piss off like beyond the walls of Rome, and there you can like bury everyone and you can build catacombs. So they did, and they started living there eventually, but it was basically a parallel society living next to a traditional society, or a traditional society. And I want to see how this manifests in technology. Obviously we have the phenomenon of blockchain, we have the phenomenon of decentralization. I, on one hand, really want to de-bullshit this, and on the other hand, I want to show how through these technologies, whether it's artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and embodiment within that, or blockchain, you've got basically parallel civilizations that are kind of creating, almost like in a very tribalistic way, because people are like looking for an outlet that technology is giving them. So, to sum up, for the last 2 years I spent kind of de-bullshitting artificial intelligence for the general public, but I've really missed academia. What Dodo was talking about, like the love that something gives you, like when I can read and when I can study, and I was like, damn, I miss this. So we started, it's very fresh, it's a week old, but we started a research group at the Faculty of Information Technology here. Hopefully it'll be a bilateral cooperation with Oxford, and we'll be studying basically the emergence of society, emergent behaviors, like you have cellular automata in AI, we're looking for emergent patterns in civilizations, and we'll be doing that by building Plato's polis in virtual reality and basically testing things like the genesis of conflict, how the fragmentation of society, whether someone kills someone, but, you know, all of that stuff is going to be relevant. So we're just starting, and we're basically merging archaeological theory of civilizations with the effect of technology. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Sounds magical. Now, of course, this is on a vastly more pop culture level, but what do you make of the metaverse and the like?
Yeah, good question. I think Meta is a kind of Zuckerberg PR piece to divert from the fact that they had like 3 massive data leaks from Facebook. And Meta is just hugely misunderstood, and the metaverse. Like I've seen an article about, for example, top AI research scientist claims that we'll have virtual children because we don't need to live in the physical world. And that's a massive misinterpretation. By cloud civilizations, that doesn't mean digitalizing your every behavior, which is what metaverse, or like the Web 3.0 point tends to be. But it's actually about living in the physical world just under different rules and different practices and different behaviors. So still very much physical. And the metaverse is a little bit kind of like bullshit digital sometimes, and more PR than actual reality, because it's just like shitty looking avatars and like virtual realities of it, like, well, that's not really what this is about. So yeah.
Bolek, we're going to echo one of the points that Sara just made, so living in the real world but somehow enhancing it through other digital means or through other means in general. Longevity, that is of course your topic, judging not only by what I read about you but also by your t-shirt. So could you give us a little bit of insight into
Supreme.
into longevity as a concept?
Sure. It's how to begin. I guess like for me personally at least, I came to the topic initially through basically transhumanism. And that's how it started, through basically Ray Kurzweil and then Aubrey de Grey, who's kind of a pretty famous person in the space who kind of started it in a sense. And the initial motivation for me was that, I enjoy life. Life's pretty cool for me, so I kind of want to live longer, That's the initial selfish motivation. But over time, the more I kind of got into it, I started writing some blog articles about it, and I realized that there's a pretty good number of arguments why we should actually think about aging. And particularly now, because we are in the first time, basically, I guess the last few years, in the whole history of the planet, where there are basically more old people over, I guess, 55 or 65, rather than young people or children under 5, basically. So that means that there's going to be a massive shift in basically the demography of the whole population and the world. And some places are already there, for example Japan. Others are not so yet there, but will be there over time. And it's kind of speeding up all over the world. Usually the demographic transfer from you kind of women in the society giving birth to a lot of children, so they survive and take care of the family later. To sustainable, I guess not sustainable, but having basically two childs per family. That usually took in England. I think that took 100 years. In the new upcoming states in Africa, it takes less than 10. So the transfer is very fast, and that means that there will be a lot of problems, with pensions, with healthcare systems, because I think 60 or 70% of healthcare spending is actually on people over 65. Or 55, and those are usually diseases, or why we are spending so much is because those are comorbidities and diseases that come with old age, basically. And we've over the last, 50, 60 years, we've tried this approach which is called geriatrics, and that basically means that you will treat the symptoms of each specific disease, cancer, heart disease, either neurological diseases or others, basically diabetes, whatever, all these kind of we can call it civilization diseases as well, but it didn't really work. We've improved the lifespan of people over last 50 years, maybe by 10 years on average. The problem is that it's not the improvement isn't, those aren't years that you spend in healthy life, basically. It's usually you already have some disabilities or some comorbidities at that time. So what longevity is about is basically trying to figure out, okay, so we have this problem, it's a massive problem that could even basically bring the whole civilization kind of down if we don't address it somehow. The current approaches that medicine is taking is not really it. So what can we do about it? And the approach that longevity or the industry, sometimes also called geroscience is called, is taking is basically, trying to figure out how aging works and then address it at the root. So if we know that there are some things that everybody is going through, and we can try to address it, then it might actually work. We've tried before to kind of slow aging by addressing metabolism and trying to slow it down, which doesn't really work because metabolism is very complex. If you ever see the schema of whatever works together and how it flows, it's like a spaghetti code basically. So you cannot really do that. But what you can do is actually try to find places where some damage is accumulated. So what the new approach basically is, and it's pretty new, it's decade old, but it's finally mainstream, is that you kind of find different parts, and it's called hallmarks of aging. So hallmarks of aging that everybody is kind of accumulating throughout the time, and you try to address them and basically repair them or remove them or whatever. And that seems to be very promising. We have some initial data that even some old already drugs that are used, for example, for diabetes, that we can actually repurpose them, and they actually act on some like underlying causes. And there are like a whole new industry where there's billions of dollars per year invested into like new startups and new science that's trying to kind of address and find ways that we can kind of slow down or reverse even aging and enable people to live in health longer, ideally. But the part health is the most important part, because nobody wants to live like 100 years if they are not healthy. So the first part is like, if you can make people healthy, then the second order effect probably will be that they will also live longer. And that's kind of the whole thesis.
My question with this would definitely be is if, if you're doing some research into longevity, there's a good chance that a lot of the results will be visible in some time. Like it's not really something that you can kind of put under a microscope, take a look at and see if it works. How does one deal with that? How does one deal with having to wait for the results of the research for some time?
There actually is a way how you can put it under the microscope and deal with that. There are so-called epigenetic clocks or deep epigenetic clocks, obviously with the use of AI as well. And how it works, basically, that you have your genome, and on top of that you have epigenome, which kind of modulates how your genes express. And you can find, if you sequence the genome and epigenome, you can find patterns how your epigenome changes throughout age. And then you can basically like find different models and then predict age based on how your epigenome basically looks. That's a field that's seen pretty huge progress over the last few years, and so now you can actually even purchase a test. It's pretty pricey right now, but it will come down over time. And so you can get the test, and it will actually tell you your like biological age as well as your rate of aging, which is like, it doesn't cover all of the hallmarks of aging, so it's kind of it's part of it, but we are still figuring out like new ways how we can basically measure aging. And the whole why we are doing it is basically exactly what you said. If you want to have like some therapies and kind of somehow affect aging, you want to be able to measure it like sooner than in 20 years, right? So that's basically the whole set. You do some intervention and measure before and after, after a year or so, and see whether the aging hallmarks that we can measure already, and whether the age basically changes and the rate of aging changes as well. So it's there already. It's like not perfect yet, but in a few years I think we'll be in pretty good place where we can pretty cheaply measure your age. I already did that, so yeah, it can be that.
That was my next question, if you actually did it.
Yeah, I did. Actually, my biological age actually is 15, so that's good.
Oh wow!
Seems my whole stack of supplements is working, so that's good. But we'll see whether it will, over time also stay the same, because there are still some problems with the measurement, so we'll see.
Magic. Dodo, question for you.
Okay.
Why did you decide to modify yourself in the way that you did?
Okay, so it was, maybe I would like to tell the whole story, or like the story that's behind. And yes, so have I microphone in order? Because I don't know. Yes, and now the microphone can hear me, or because...
Can you hear all right?
Okay, like, okay, I was asking for the record, I hope it's...
Boys, is it all right?
The recording is fine, I'll just adjust a little bit so it doesn't look wrong on camera. Just
okay.
the cable.
Transhumanism in action.
Fine.
So yes, it was in 2019. I was in first year of my high school, and I went to Futureport Prague, which is the biggest futuristic festival. I work with them, so yes, it's the biggest futuristic festival in Central Europe. And then there I saw a lecture by Neil Harbison. As I mentioned before, he's the man with the antenna. And I was so nervous because I knew about him. I read about him sometimes in 7th grade. And so I wanted to, I have always been into technologies and future and, cyborgs. And I really wanted to meet him in real life. So I went, I reached him, and I asked for a selfie with him. And that was all. Yes, I said only, thank you, and then I left. But something changed, and I figured out that I'm like interested in what he is doing, and so I started to read everything about cyborg art. I started to, it became my special interest, but I felt alone. I didn't know who to ask, because I was like in Czech Republic. There was nobody that I can work with. And yes, it was pretty long journey, it was like, yes, it was kind of difficult, because yes, I was like the maybe first cyborg artist even in Czech Republic, and I want to bring this topic more to this society. So I'm glad I can say that I collaborate with Paralelní polis. If you want to explain what Paralelní polis is.
Oh, no, go for it.
No, because I think that you will be better at it.
Oh, yeah, sure. The Paralelní polis or parallel polis is basically somewhat what I was describing already. It's it's a multidisciplinary, basically research organization, like a multidisciplinary NGO, where we've got a triangle in our kind of symbol, and the triangle is technology, art, and science. So we are all about basically like having a multidisciplinary approach towards the data that the world around us basically produces, and trying to view it through different lens. And the whole idea is to be completely like independent of the state, not out of like any like brat syndrome, but just because we're genuinely interested how parallel societies can function, and whether they can function without being embedded in the official structures. It's basically, it's originally by an essay by Václav Benda, who during the communist era, the Czech Republic, basically wrote about the fact that you've got some kind of like ruling institution, and overthrowing that is evolutionarily impossible, or it's like not the most optimal journey, like the most optimal way how to like dedicate your efforts. So you basically create like this parallel functioning underground, which has been massively enabled, of course, through technologies like cryptocurrencies and blockchain. So yeah, I think that's in a nutshell.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I work with them, and I have there something like shelter, and I'm so glad for it, because now I can I think that I'm spreading the word about cyborgism, and I also co-work with Neil Harbison and his colleagues from Barcelona. So I'm really glad, and as I mentioned before, I have as a proof of my cyborgness, I have my cyborg gun, which I don't use in last months because it's broken. But now I explore my cyborg identity through my chip implant, and it's like NFC and RFID chip. And I can open some doors with it. I can open my laptop with it. I can put there some links. I will show you. Wait a minute. Okay, yes. Mm-hmm. What we are having there?
Perfect.
Yes. You rickrolled people with a chip. Wow. Okay, that's peak transhumanism.
I love it.
Peak cyborgism. That's amazing. That's amazing.
So yes, and for me, cyborgism is a part of my soul, because I want to be like embodiment of non-duality. I have always felt that I am somewhere between worlds. I am like non-binary since my very childhood. I'm not identifying myself as a girl nor as a boy. And for example, I learned how to draw and write with both of my hands. So I have always want to be like non-binary, non-dual person, and cyborgism is something that is so it's really iconic, that how it stands between nature and technology, that I feel like it was just made for me.
Nice.
And maybe a follow-up question, are there any modifications that you have in mind or that you would like to
Yes,
develop?
I want more chips. I have planned 3 more chips, one for to pay in Czech crowns, in fiat money, mm-hmm. Yes. It's a new model, it's called Valetmore. It's implanted where you can pay not in cryptocurrencies but in actual money, or let's say, no, I'm not like often in cryptocurrencies. I'm sorry, you know what I mean, like fiat money.
Yeah,
yes, they are called. So, and I plan one chip that I will be able to open my doors of our house with, and one chip with a light, because I want to have chip with a light, because it's nice.
Nice.
And I want to, of course, like upgrade or repair my cyborg organ and try to collaborate with people to make new models. So if you are interested in radioactivity and in like electronics, you can help me. I will be more than happy.
So that's a call to action for you all. If any of you are interested, stop by after the debate and, you know, do some networking and see how you feel about yourself. So that will be the end of the second portion of the debate. Do you have any questions now?
Not all at once, please.
Still no questions? Well, I have one, which obviously is odd. I wanted to ask a little bit about, because this is in part by a debate done by the AI Center. I wanted to ask a little bit about the relationship between artificial intelligence and transhumanism. Sarah, where is it? Is it there, and where is it, if it is?
It's a good question. I think you can split it in three parts. You can have, like, the most obvious one is robotics, I guess.
Sorry.
The most obvious one, I think, is robotics, where you have like an obvious physical, tangible aspect that you can kind of like augment your body with. So that's the first one. The second one is actually something that it helps you do with your free time, or like the way that you can interact with the data and the world around you. So the fact that you can have personalized medicine, like the way that medicine is done these days, is like, it's grotesque. It's just like 19th century statistics, where actually, like, why do you go to the doctors like once a year? Because that's the middle of the Gaussian curve. It's the safest thing to do. That kind of works best for everyone. But like, for example, when we get to COVID, one of my lungs is busted when I was young, and it doesn't really work. And so obviously COVID is going to have a completely different effect on me than anyone else. But you still get statistically the same treatment as like the average when you go to the doctor. That's just completely unnecessary. And I think personalized medicine and personalized education, it's not obvious transhumanism, but it can change the modus operandi of your life so much that it is transhumanism in a certain aspect, and can definitely have epigenetic effects as well. And then I guess the final one, which is sentience or cognition, and that's the most dangerous minefield out there, because there's so many bullshit articles coming out about artificial intelligence, and it's really like let rip in the last month. Because DeepMind, I think it was DeepMind who introduced the Gato model, and that was basically like, oh, we're towards artificial general intelligence because our algorithm can do 600 different tasks. But when you dig into it, what it can do is play an 80s Atari game. It can generate images, generate text, and basically like all that kind of stuff. But it's like a Swiss Army knife. That's got nothing to do with any form of consciousness. That's just like, you can use it for different stuff. But the way that they're selling it to the public is very much like, oh yeah, no, like, this is like, we're one step away. Like, and I think the headline was like, party's over, like AI is taking over. It's like, oh, come on. And this kind of conscience aspect, I think, is the most interesting, but also the most dangerous, because, like, for example, my friend Tomáš Mikolov, if you don't know him, he's like awesome. He's the coolest guy, and he's doing research just over there on artificial general intelligence, but at the same time he's a massive skeptic, and he uses the cellular automata to basically generate emergent behavioral patterns algorithmically. And that's generally interesting, and that it's interesting to understand what artificial life is, A-life. There's been a conference on it recently here. So that's cool, but there's a really fine line between that and rigorous research and then the bullshit. And I think that's maybe where transhumanism and AI meet most.
You've mentioned consciousness, and that being said, I have to ask, because I'm sure a lot of you have read about this claim that one of the chatbots gained consciousness, and judging by your face, you have some opinions on it. So what are they?
Very strong opinions on it. So basically, they're language models, pretty much that like Google Translate runs on, etc., and or like any kind of chatbot. And it's basically an extremely sophisticated parrot that has a massive database of words and phrases and associations. And you know those claws at like fun fairs where like you go and like you grab the teddy bear, and that's what it does when it like answers your question. Neural networks have, for example, extremely limited memory. So like after like 5 questions, they can't remember. They start asking you stuff over and over again. But they're extremely good at mimicking. And at the same time, humans are extremely good at anthropomorphizing stuff. So there's an evolutionary kind of principle called neoteny, for example, that if something seems cute or human-like, we love it, which is why we love puppies, for example, and we give them extremely human attributes. It's the same with the chatbot. The history of this is basically there's a guy that was like this random weirdo at Google, and basically like he's a real like mysticist, and he was like in the mystic church of like something, and he was like, oh, I spent a year talking to this chatbot and I know what a human sounds like. And the chatbot was just saying stuff like, that seemed human but had nothing to do with humanity. So he saw a massive PR opportunity in this as a Google engineer, which has massive social capital. So he'd be like, oh yeah, oh, they're sentient. But Google also saw a massive PR opportunity, and they decided to sack him very bombastically and say, oh, he's got to get out of here. Immediately the reactions are, oh, what's Google hiding? Oh my God, they've definitely got like sentient AI. It's like, no, they've got a chatbot that's got really good PR coverage, because Google scientists often have very good relationships with like publishers from Nature, etc. It's a big PR machine. It's like the current wars with Tesla and Edison. Like when there's money to be made somewhere, there's good PR to be made somewhere as well. So it's just like snowballed into this like ridiculous story where actually it's just like a better parrot. Yeah, and they of course also, sorry, they said that it passed the Turing test massively, but it's very easy to fool a human. I mean, David Copperfield fools us with the fact that he made Grand Canyon disappear, so like we're pretty easy to be tricked, which this guy abused very well.
You've mentioned fetishizing the topic. Is this a case of it?
100%, yeah. And actually, paradoxically, I saw a lot of understanding of what AI is in terms of the conflict in the Ukraine, because suddenly people started understanding what it means in like a day-to-day situation. So, for example, using machine vision to identify the types of artillery on the ground, etc. People started understanding a little bit more, but now there's been like 3-4 really bombastic articles around these lines, and it's just ruining because like you do like 50 debullshitting talks, and then one article like this comes out. And sorry, there was one last article, which I'm also interested in your guys' opinion on it. They said that they created a conscious, but like a living manifestation of this consciousness, which is that they generated some cells and they coated them over like a robotic hand, and they're like, oh yeah, we're ready, Terminator's here. It's like, no, it's really not. And of course, Elon Musk with his Tesla bot, which is also annoying me incredibly, but we can get to that later. I don't want to take up too much space.
And Donna, you mentioned you had some points. No thoughts about it in terms of spirituality and you know that aspect of it all.
No, I just want to, like, I was reacting to the fact that you were about to ask like all of us this question, so I said that I'm not prepared to, I can't talk about it from the technical point of view like Sarah, but I can only say something like spiritual for me, like for me, for example, like I believe spiritually that the consciousness is non-dual and we are all the part of the same consciousness. So in this case, why like machine cannot be conscious, and that's all. But I like in the jak se řekne světský.
Světský to secular, yeah. Thank you.
In the secular point of view, I also think it's bullshit. So
there you go. That's
I love that.
And we have a question. Magic, go for it.
Yeah, hello. I just wanted to ask that you said that these kind of mimicking programs they react on the base of the asker or the guy who asked the questions, but we all know that these kind of programs can somehow like affecting, let's say, voters, because they extract the information what they want to hear and create the, let's say, tool for the one who wants to manipulate with those who want to hear this kind of specific truth, and they create, let's say, base for this guy who want to manipulate, how to manipulate with those group, which is not defined group, but it's like, let's say 52% of people want to hear this, so we create some political program saying this. They wanted to hear it, and we already see it. We already knew that, let's say, Brexit was affecting by this kind of program, not mind, but algorithm, or I don't know how to say it. So in the future, it's obvious that there's gonna be more of this kind of manipulation, and not everyone is too clever to see through. So it's gonna happen, and we are talking about the positive things that transhumanism gives us, or this kind of technology gives us, but there is a like really dark side of the transhumanism and technologies, which also help manipulators to manipulate with people who are not more clever than let's say, programs or algorithms.
Yeah, I actually respectfully disagree with that. It's not a dark side of transhumanism, it's a dark side of humans. Like fake news, like it's always been around. Like it's like all that AI allows for is scale. It's not a different kind of, the recommendation algorithms behind it are not a different mechanism. And I actually, funny you mentioned Brexit, that was another part of like PR. I actually built the digital infrastructure on both sides of the Brexit campaign because I used to work in Nation Builder, which was a non-partisan platform, and we didn't do any, we were apolitical, and I am fiercely apolitical, so for example, I don't vote. I basically built like the email, this like CRM, the CMS and stuff like that. And there was a period, I think you're referring to Cambridge Analytica, and Cambridge Analytica basically, they had a glorified Excel spreadsheet. But it's great PR for you if you say, we've got AI, none of you know what that is, and we can analyze sentiment and predict it. Bullshit. They had a Google spreadsheet that they didn't use particularly well, and they used the idea that there were some political machinations in the background so that they can actually make a great name on it. And the people from Cambridge Analytica then went to pursue actually very active and kind of like heavily kind of pumped up careers because of this. Like they use like negative campaign for like their own benefit. And the thing is that recommendation algorithms, it's a great business model by like people like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that. So that, yeah, it shows you what you want to see, but what do we say like in real life with humans? Like you rarely go into confrontation. You want to make sure that you say what the people want to hear as well. Like it's a very human thing, and AI is just scaling it. But because AI, you can't really touch it and you can't really see it, it's then very, very easy for the party that just lost the vote to say, oh, yeah, we lost because of those dastardly algorithms. Like, no, you lost because you're shit. And like, if you understood how it works, then it'll be fine. And then it actually gets into the kind of social epigenetics as well. And something I'm very wary of is like, there's a group of people that's not intelligent enough that they can't see through. I actually disagree with that. The people know pretty well like what's going on, but they're just frustrated with the system and they don't know what else to do. So they turn to polarization and tribalization. And again, kind of AI is used as this like, lamb to the slaughter to like blame everything on it, but it's because it's not sentient, it's just replicating human behavior, so it's just giving us a very good mirror. I understand where you're coming from, but that's why I think the popularization of AI is so important for the masses, so that they realize what it is, that it's just glorified statistics, and that they really need to be looking and holding the humans accountable and themselves accountable rather than like a technology that doesn't even exist in the way that they understand it.
To follow up on this, maybe like it's not just AI and transhumanism at all. It's basically like tech, right? Like technology is basically like being scapegoated for a lot of things. And the problem is that like technology is always a double-edged sword, and you can use it for good and for bad. And you know, usually, at least how I see it, it's like 2 steps forward, one step back. So you always need to like the problem in the end always comes back to people who deploy the technology and how they use it. So there's a part of why transhumanism, for me at least, is kind of a questionable, not questionable, but like why I don't agree with all of it, is because in the end it always comes back to humans, right? So if you have if the humans are shit, the use of the technology will be shit as well. So like I would rather see a lot of more focus on like improving humans like mentally themselves, because what tech is basically doing is like connecting and amplifying the networks between which you already have, right? The social networks are just a prime example of like faster connection and faster basically information transfer. So if the information that's being transferred from the people to other people is bad because the people cannot like judge it well or don't know what to, how to communicate well and how to behave basically well, then like any technology that you will develop will basically like end badly. So what kind of where I see the problem with transhumanism partly is that there's a lot of focus on tech itself and that it will solve everything. And partly sure it can solve problems, but if you don't look at the human part of the issue and you don't spend enough like money and attention and kind of development time, I guess, of the whole society or the whole like planet on improving humans themselves. You know, there's a lot of people who are struggling with mental health, particularly during COVID and all of that, and it's like, you know, a pandemic basically. You know, a lot of young people are on like antidepressants and all of that. So like, if you put all these things together and then, you know, amplified by tech, you have a recipe for problem. But it's not necessarily like the problem of the tech itself. It's about the whole like, you know, environment in which the people and the tech interacts basically. So if you like address that, then the tech will be okay.
Yeah.
Actually, I more than agree with this all you said. It's not attacking or whatever. I agree with this, but at the same time, the technology is much faster than the spirituality of, let's say, living. So it's good that there is also the artistic part of this kind of technology. It's good. I'm with it, but still, maybe it's too fast for let's say, a lot of people, and they are not designed to understand it so fast. So they don't understand it, and that's the reason why they're afraid of it. And maybe the reaction was about, like you said, Jelky mentioned before, that the people are afraid, they don't understand. And you mentioned later that it's really important to have these lectures like this to make people understand. And again, I agree with it, but still the technology industry is like huge, and it's generated a lot of money, not like keeping the people not knowing the algorithms, not knowing how it works, because it generates the money. They just like trying to keep them in not knowing because it gives them some profit from it. So I think it's really bad. I'm glad that you are talking about it, and this is my question was originated from.
Yeah. Thank you. And just a very, very quick reaction. You're absolutely right, and thank you for the question. It was a great question. And I think we touched on some really important points. And you're absolutely right that mystifying people always pays better than like telling them like the reality. It is even the way that these articles are written. They're written like clickbait, because like it's much sexier to write, has AI gained consciousness, then do we have a better data classifier? Like, it's because no one would click on it, no one's interested. What I'm really looking forward to is the trend of the transparency and explainability of algorithms. I think that's fantastic, because they're not black box in the sense, oh, we don't know what it's doing. It's just like too statistically complicated, so like our brains can't really deal with it, so it's fine. But it's nothing like unpredictable mathematically. And I think telling that to people, and like, for example, Facebook started doing like these things a little bit recently, like very slowly, but say like, oh, why am I seeing this ad, for example? And those are the steps forward to letting people know that like you're seeing it for a reason. But the problem is that people are leaving behind so much money in their data, and they think that like Facebook is free. It's not free. Like, you know, it's like if a company came over here and like took all of our lithium and then pissed off again and like gave us zero tax. That's exactly what's happening with these companies. They're taking so much data, and so I think transparency is great. The only thing that's slightly like screwing this up right now is the proposed EU regulation, which is complex and difficult, and I'm just wondering that I hope that it goes well. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. Otherwise, yeah.
There'll be definitely more time for debate and questions after the very last portion of the discussion that we have today. And since our time is running out, it's going to be a quick one. It's going to be a quick fire round. I'd like to know what is next in terms of transhumanism 2.0, because we love 2.0 based things. So I'm going to inquire about the possibility of tech. I'm going to inquire about the possibility of philosophy and spirituality in transhumanism. So, Bolek, why don't you take it away?
Sure. Easy question. For me, I guess, and I already alluded to this in the reply before, I see that transhumanism, like, you know, science and technology are going to be basically progressing exponentially, probably even like without us doing much about it. But what I think is worthy of trying to focus more on is exactly the improvement of like human mental health, or like basically health condition, so that then once we already have all these technologies, we are better equipped to deal with them. So that would be my kind of idea of transhumanism. So less of the over-individualistic and, you know, tech will solve all, and trying to take a bit more responsibility of how we use tech, basically, and pull it a bit back into like, you know, not kind of alienating ourselves too much from like nature or like our environment and our society and our communities, and trying to like be, you know, part of the world, or of the physical world, and use the meta world kind of only as like a part where we maybe communicate better or in a different way, but not as something where we kind of retreat and you know, give up all our like normal lives. Because I think we've seen during COVID that, you know, just kind of closing ourselves out of the society completely and living in a like a small room and having like VR glasses on isn't exactly the thing that most people are like striving in. So that would be kind of the direction, less of the like too techno, I guess, not techno-solution. Techno-solution is good, but like everything will be solved just by tech, and we can just like retreat to our homes and with VR glasses on. I don't think that's a good way forward. So trying to bring it back to, you know, normal societies, communities, plus tech on top of it to improve it. That would be my kind of like transhumanism, I guess.
Dodo, do you have some thoughts?
I don't know. I just want to say that I'm only, let's be real, I'm only a high school student who lives their cyborg dream. So I'm not like I'm not a real expert like them. So I wouldn't say don't think that I will say something like wise or something like that, because I'm not a sociologist.
Sociologist, that's fine, good for you.
Or futurist or something like that. But I just believe that people will still be in touch with nature, with love, and with spirituality, and with each other. And I don't believe in dark future. That's all.
Sarah, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I can't say anything that's already not been said. I completely agree with both of you, and I think it's the cloud civilization, which I want to research, and the embodiment of that. So understanding the metaverse, exactly, not like just like being in a vegetative state with a VR set on, but just like moving in the world in a different, evolutionary, smarter, optimized kind of social way. And yeah, I think that that's going to be the next step.
Magic, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. This was, of course, the debate on transhumanism in research and in life. Thank you so much for being here. If you have any other questions, you're more than welcome to drop by and talk to our panelists about them. Thank you so much. It was great.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you for the great questions to our amazing moderator.
Yes.